Welcome to STO Building Conversations, a construction podcast powered by the STO Building Group. On today's episode, Rob Leon, Executive Vice President of STO's Global Services Group, speaks with Tom Scarangello, Executive Chairman of Thornton Tomasetti, and Jim Donaghy, Executive Chairman of STO Building Group, about the origin of the AEC Angels Group and how they're driving innovation from within the industry. This episode is part one of our interview with Tom and Jim.
Today, we are joined by Tom Scarangello, Chairman of Thornton Tomasetti, and Jim Donaghy, Executive Chairman of STO Building Group. And the topic of conversation today is innovation and the AEC Angels. So just gentlemen, just starting off, would you mind giving us a little introduction to yourselves and your companies and how long you've been in the business?
Go ahead, Tom.
So I've been in the business over 40 years. Our firm has been around for 70 plus. We just had our anniversary about a year ago, back in the pre-COVID days where we were all able to get together and have a big celebration. Looking forward to that happening again. And we are an employee-owned international team of ingenious engineers, everything from architects, scientists, and support professionals who evaluate and solve our clients' challenges throughout the life cycle of their assets. And those assets could be anything from buildings to stadiums to submarines to heartsteads. We're almost 1,500 people, and we're in more than 50 offices around the world.
Great. Thanks, Tom. And Jim?
So I've been with Structure Tone my whole career, started in 1989. Full-time out of college, and today I'm executive chairman. I kind of grew up through the ranks in Structure Tone through each of the operations and estimating, and got into some of our national stuff as well. I spent time on the road at Structure Tone, 2.5 years, in fact, in our Florida, Texas, and then one of our overseas projects. So got a good training program inside Structure Tone before getting to the executive suite. So my whole industry experiences at Structure Tone, it's been great. We have really diversified the company. And today there's a lot to talk about as far as innovation. So that's my background.
Great, thank you. So our industry has been labeled as slow to adopt new technologies and innovation, but innovation is clearly the passion of each of you, but also embedded in each company. Can you talk a little bit about what sparked your desire to push for more innovative and efficient processes in respective to those companies? And Tom, we can start with you.
Sure. As I said, we're over 70 years old as a company, and no company lasts or thrives for that long without innovating. But about 10 years ago, as we were expanding both geographically and in our service line, we started to think about what was the big goal that we could unify our employees around and excite them and really drive the company forward. We landed on to be the global driver of change and innovation in our industry. And I think the key word in that statement is driver. What was clear was we were always both an adopter and we would react to innovation and try to be an early adopter, but we weren't really driving it, I would say, in the way that, and I would say our industry has never really been a driver of innovation. You know, if you look at things like BIM, the aviation industry was using building information modeling in the 90s, early 90s to mid 90s. And, you know, we woke up to it in the mid 2000s like we had discovered something. You know, I think throughout the industry, you've seen that. It's not just us. You know, we always reference Harvard Business Review ranking where the construction industry was ranked 40th of 40 industries in adopting innovation. And that was only back in 2013 or 2014. So what we looked at was when we recognized the difference between being an early adopter versus a driver, we started to build an ecosystem that would allow that to happen. And so we created a group within Thornton Tomasetti, an incubator called CORE, in which we have people who are dedicated to taking the best ideas at Thornton Tomasetti and moving them forward in the categories of both incremental innovation, adjacent, and blue sky innovation. We created a twin and outside accelerator so that we could take the IP that was trapped or not being able to have the support it would need if it was something outside of our sweet spot, that we could take it outside the firm. And then we started to recognize the need to broaden our exposure beyond just our own ecosystem. And that's where we started to talk to firms like the STL Group about how do we do this as an industry, and we'll get into it later, but you know that's kind of where AEC Angels came from, this idea of getting outside our own space in an industry that's driven by collaboration, but also constrained by collaboration. That's the third leg of the stool, at least in our approach to innovation. That's key. It's making sure that the whole industry is engaged, not just our individual firm.
I think that's a great point, and I think that really goes to the core of some of our values here at STO Building Group too. Is that we have been, I would say, a very innovative company, and I've been here since 1994, so I've been here for a long, long time and seen the changes. But it's really over the last probably about 3 years, Jim, that we've really started putting structure to the innovation process. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Sure, Rob. Yeah, in the last few years, we've realized there's a need to organize ourselves internally and to position ourselves correctly so that our national clients and our large partners and national partners that we work with, like Thornton Tomasetti, view us as a value-added team member. We knew we had to start making bigger and more strategic investments. And to do so, we had to be really strategic in selecting those investments and incorporating a lot more input internal to us, not only at the senior executive level, but at all ranks throughout the company. So we had to really organize. And we've got quite a few groups internally. We've got our emerging leader group. Rob, as you know, is one of our upcoming groups in the organization. Our future leaders are in that group. And it starts with our RPE program, in fact, where we really try to work hard at training our staff and don't just let them grow in the field or in the office and let time be their guide as far as their training. We really try to accelerate training. We believe in experiential training and really bringing our staff to some of the great training centers. Their leadership is one of those places where we've spent a lot of time up at West Point, having our staff be exposed to some of the great ideas from our military as far as leadership goes. But in those training sessions and in all of those interactions, we gather ideas, and now we have a structure internal to take those ideas and bring them into a very focused group, whether it's the Center of Excellence and Innovation for Operations or Center of Excellence Innovation for Estimating or for Business Development. We have 3 of them. Those groups are leaders in all their respective disciplines throughout our company. And they not only talk about best practices and knowledge sharing, but they consider all those great ideas that are circulating in from our training programs. And it's a good structure. It makes its way up to the top. We have an innovation council. And in that council, we have really the leaders of our company, including Bob Mullen, our CEO, and Greg Dunkel, our CAO. We're going to add to our executive ranks in innovation executive. Today, it's a handful of us that represent that at STO, but by next year this time, there'll be another executive in our group spearheading our innovation council. We've also decided it was important to go outside ourselves and not just be talking to ourselves like in an echo chamber. So the AEC Angel Group, which we'll talk more about shortly, is one of our many efforts to be out in the market in a meaningful way, partnering and getting outside the box and not just being a contractor and understanding the world around us a lot better.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, I think one of the things that from talking to the two of you on several occasions and just, being involved in the AEC Angels group and our innovation group internally, the theme that I hear, consistently is that we need to do this from within the industry, not outside disruptors. And we also need to do it collaboratively. And I think that's what really drove the partnership of AEC Angels. So I'm going to read the AEC Angels mission statement because I think it says a lot to how the group was put together. And then I think we can go into the vision of the two of you of how it started and how it can grow. So the mission statement is to leverage our collective complementary knowledge, investing in best-of-class AEC sector technologies to help transform the industry while driving exposure to leading industry technologies and striving to provide long-term returns over a 5 to 7 year horizon. So knowing the story behind that a bit, maybe you can talk about, it's not only about the investment, the dollar, the check that you're writing, it's also about the investment in the technology of how do we incorporate it, test it within our companies, but then also improve it for the greater good of the industry. So this is not meant to be just within Thornton Tomasetti, Structure Tone, Syska Hennessy, SHoP. This is the group that wants to really drive change throughout the industry from within the industry. So Tom, maybe you can talk a bit about who are the AEC Angels and where did the idea come from?
Sure. Well, you just mentioned the partners, Syska Hennessy, SHoP, STL Group, and Thornton Tomasetti. And again, we have aspirations to broaden that group. But as you said, it's not about being this siloed group. It's just the opposite. The strength of our industry is its ability to collaborate. It's also the challenge of our industry and the reason why in many ways innovation has been slow to take root, because everything requires a consensus and collaboration to move forward. But what we've seen in the last decade, in the last 5 years especially, the outside world has been looking with a laser focus now on our industry. And why? Because they see huge opportunities to both innovate and to streamline our process. There's no question that the construction industry is an industry that, like I said earlier, it's ripe for disruption and innovation. And, I use construction industry. Sometimes people say, hey, Tom, your firm, you have architects, engineers, and scientists. But I always say that, we're in the business of wanting to see whatever we work on get built. So that's the industry we're in, right? Where if it didn't get built, we'd just be mathematicians and artists. We pride ourselves in saying at the end of the day, whatever we work on comes to fruition. And so we're part of an industry that actually requires collaboration and needs collaboration to move forward. So the genesis in particular for me for the AEC Angels was something that came a little bit far afield coming out of our twin accelerator. We spun out a company about 5 years ago when we merged with Weidlinger that has become a company called OnScale. And it's actually in the computer-aided engineering, cloud-based solution space. And it's focused, believe it or not, on kind of multi-physics analysis of things like 5G chips and MEMS and other things like that. And again, I talked about the 3 levels of innovation. That was kind of the blue sky, an area in which we were working. We developed a tool that was outside our space, so we spun it out and it's moving forward. But in its early days, where we were looking for seed investment, our CEO of OnScale came to us and said there was a group called the Band of Angels that wanted to invest in OnScale. And, told us what the investment was and the terms. And I was like, wow, those are pretty nice terms. Why are we giving them these terms? And they said, well, if Band of Angels invests in this technology, follow-on money will come because there are 300 or more people in Silicon Valley who've all had success. They've all had exits over the last 30 years. They vet on a regular basis technology. And because they're the experts, people really look to them as kind of a pre-vetting of what's the best technology. I didn't know about it. We said, sure. Less than a year later, we had significant investment by Intel Capital and Gradient Ventures, which is Google's investment arm. And OnScale has kind of been off to the races ever since. So, as I thought about that and as I talked to people like Jim and others in our group, we started to think of, why aren't we those people? Silicon Valley is a very siloed area in and of itself. Our industry is, all over the world. But starting with a group of ours in New York and in the US in particular, we know what can work and what can't work. We know, what the barriers are. And just as importantly, because of the focus on our industry, if we don't do it, if we don't disrupt our own industry in a positive way, we're going to be disrupted from the outside. And none of us want that to happen because we want to be in charge of our future, not have somebody come and disrupt us. And so that's where kind of the genesis of the idea started. And then the group got together and really flushed it out in a way that I think is pretty exciting and I think is going to, expand and help us drive our industry from the inside out versus from the outside in.
Oh, that's great. And Jim, being internal here at STO Building Group, I kind of get to see the wheels in motion and the gears in motion. And, we pulled together a small group. Greg Dunkel and I led a small group, went to Oxford University. We did co-innovation sessions with Syska and Gensler and the like. And from my point of view, I've always seen the innovative process happening, not just by yourself personally as an innovator, but also as an organization. We've always been allowed to and pushed to actually take those innovative steps, those entrepreneurial steps to better the organization and to better our ties within the industry for our partners. So the change happened, Structure Tone to STO Building Group, our footprint, partnerships, mergers, acquisitions. Can you talk a bit about how that fueled the desire and I guess the momentum for the innovation process within STO Building Group?
Sure. Rob, as you said, mergers and acquisitions have accelerated our growth and our footprint. And just to step back for a moment, even prior to the accelerated growth, we were growing on average about 7% a year over 25 years, which is a nice steady growth. But in doing so, we had expanded to over 20 locations, and the number of types of projects we were working on, probably the most unique project demographic there is in the ENR, say, top 50, for the last decade, that would be true because of the amount of small projects and the number of sectors we work in. When you add in the number of cities and then there's all these large national accounts, we're a very, very diverse and almost complicated company if you haven't been here your whole career. And I think we have all recognized in the past 5 or so years the need to take this data that we have. We've got an enormous amount of data and organize it so we can get a lot more value back out of our data, whether it's the artificial intelligence, the predictive analytics that we wish we had, but it's also the idea sharing and the knowledge sharing across the platform. So our merger acquisition strategy, our growth strategy with these new firms that have joined the family in the past 5 years is that we very much want them to not change a single thing about their culture, their brand intact 100%, their management teams intact 100%. All that is critically important to us. But in doing so, we want to make sure that our platforms, our systems, we can all talk technologically and digitally in a very seamless manner. So we've got to integrate these companies. We're really working hard at doing that. But it's challenged us to consider what are the best tools for the future STO Building Group, not just the current one. And at the same time, we have hundreds of these startups that are coming out with some great ideas and how we can become even more efficient and more productive and create better dashboards and creating more truth in data. So the opportunity is really what's motivating and driving us right now as I sit here. The opportunity to become so much more intelligent and have the smart systems really make our people more scalable. And sharing knowledge across this type of platform just empowers people, and it creates an excitement as well. This year we'll have our first big hackathon, and it's all these little events that we're now able to have as an organization where the ideas are not only going to be just that much more exciting because of our size, but we're structured now to invest in these ideas and partner with the outside world around us to bring ideas, even maybe commercialize some of our great ideas. So timing has never been better, but we also have never needed some of these innovation changes more than we do now. So I'm excited about the future and where this is going.
So, Jimmy, you talk about data, and I think it's really, people kind of say to me, who've known that I've been in this industry a long time, why now? And when you think about the last 10 years, we have digitized our business. It wasn't that long ago that we were still, paper and vellum, right? And over the last 10 years, everything has started to be digitized, not just our deliverables from a design standpoint, even our concepts, we're using parametric modeling and other tools. And if you look at in the construction world, you can talk to all the opportunities where you collect this data now, whether it's imagery, videos, or just the data that as people tap in on their iPads where they used to be putting it down on a clipboard. So all this data is at a moment now that it's all there. And what we're finally recognizing is the data is what we can share. And it's not, yeah, sure, there's some data that is proprietary and can give you an advantage. But in all honesty, the real advantage for the industry is when we share that data and we drive things like efficiency of design or safety in the field. All of that stuff is data we can share and drives the industry together. I think the firms that are going to kind of win the race are the ones who are first to embrace the digitization and efficient use of that data. But I think the sharing of the data is the thing that's going to finally change our industry from a siloed industry to an industry where people look at it and go, wow, that's an innovative force for change. And so that's why, to me, the AEC Angels and the kind of conversations we're having, because it's not just about let's keep it among the four of us. It's like, how do we get all these firms to share their data and use these tools so that we're all out there driving the industry together?
Tom, you hit the nail on the head. The dimension of the AEC Angel Group that's going to have the biggest impact in 5 years, we'll look back and say it was this piece that made all the difference in the world and justifies any investment we made in resources or our funds, is taking down the silos. So just one quick example, and this is something we've discussed before, the design phase where the contractor is kind of only invited up for certain pieces where, okay, provide the schedule, provide a budget, and step back out again. And not literally, but it almost feels that way where we're not truly adding the value that's now going to be possible if the digitization continues the way we see it continuing in the supply chain, and those barriers are broken down, and the major manufacturers and suppliers see us as absolute partners working on a single platform together. The data we now provide upstream in the design phase, embedding data alongside your team and all the design teams, we truly are working together and putting the data in the places where it belongs the most, allowing our client team to make decisions that much better and faster. The inefficiencies really happen in the construction cycle from design through construction and turnover is the lack of information to make faster decisions. So imagine finishing design 100% and the supply chain still doesn't know what's going on. It's almost comical, and you can see around the corner a little bit. It's not maybe right on the horizon, but it's out there. It's right around the corner, and it's the AEC Angel type of group that's going to help solve far faster by being really engaged in the market with the VCs and these IT startups, and not letting them just kind of figure this out on their own, but helping them understand the tools that we want, and they can partner with us as a group to figure out how to digitize the supply chain, embed the data up front, put us all on the same page from the day one of the planning right through the turnover, and then for the life cycle of the property. Why not stay together the whole way through? It's all digitized and implanted together. Why all these silos? it's interesting times. Somebody's going to listen to this podcast in 20 years and say, you were doing what before we digitized everything? It's going to be hard to believe that we did it this way.
And I think our recent history points, 10 years ago when we were talking about full adoption of BIM and delivering BIM models directly to the downstream user, whether that be the steel fabricator or the curtain wall, we were kind of out there on our own with a very small group of other firms that were pushing it. And I used to make the argument, this is crazy. I spent most of my career where I'm sitting there in my head, I see everything in 3D. I see all the challenges of the design. Then I dumb it down in 2D, hand it to a contractor, and we argue about the interpretation of that 2D, what's in my head versus the piece of paper versus what they have to build. And why would you not give them the full view of what was in your head or as close to that as possible? And I think that's already changed the relationship between engineers, architects, and contractors because that visualization and the data is there. The next phase, which you're talking about, is, and I see it already, if I'm in schematic or DD and I can in real time get information about pricing, not just from somebody who's using their 40 years of saying, well, in the old days, somebody'd say, well, there's 60 drawings, I think it costs this much, right? We're getting to the point now where we could get real input on, whether it's steel, connection cost, or materiality in real time in schematic and DD. So when we do finally get to a point where contractors and others are selected, we're not arguing about, whether or not we were right or wrong, about the pricing or the complexity. It was something that was tracked all along collaboratively, and teams get selected for their expertise, not because they could underbid because there's a misinterpretation on one end or the other. When we can end that, we can completely change the way that our industry works, the efficiency of it. And I think it's starting to happen, but the next 10 years, I think, is going to really be even more transformative than the last 10 years.
Yeah, and Tom, just to add another dimension, which is this story where we truly are becoming partners and the expertise is where we're valued more than mistakes or information that's not understood well enough. The expertise and the value adds truly where the focus is. But we believe right around the corner, so imagine this dimension is added to the storyline where the manufacturers and suppliers around the world understand who their clients truly are. They can see all the way end to end, and the clients can see back all the way back to the factory floor. Where's my product truly coming from? And be able to stand in front with the client team, the contractor, the designer, understanding the purchasing power of our clients. The number of units being bought from carrier or train. And to change the conversation with some of the manufacturers at the factory level, and instead of all these layers of markup, and I'm not saying that it's all about just savings as much as it's about efficiency and partnering, because ultimately, if we can be viewed for who we truly are in the marketplace, in our case, as a major contractor buyer, an expert, we would like to see the conversation change even with the manufacturers, where our teams are invited in to have discussions about these units that are being fabricated, manufactured, the new models, and bring our clients with us and have conversations about the needs of the client and the ongoing operations of the client and how that can interpolate into a better unit. And we can bulk buy differently based on the true needs of our clients and have an ongoing relationship. We don't, as a contractor, always need to be there between client and manufacturer, but we certainly want to be there for where it adds value. But today, the relationship is really broken down because of the digitization that hasn't fully occurred yet. But we are working right now on understanding every single product, every screw and widget we buy. We're going to know those numbers soon. It's going to take a while. We've got systems that have to still be built because the marketplace doesn't provide systems and tools to be able to break down estimating in a way where we can then quantify all the purchasing that's being done by client or by region or by product type. It's really done transactionally by trade is the way the industry works today. So that's going to, once that's broken down and all the little pieces are known and understood and digitized, put that into the design partnering that we just talked about. And think about the empowering we would have for the big players in the market and for our clients, the efficiencies that we would gain. It's pretty exciting. I'd rather be 25 years old right now for what's coming down the pike.
For a lot of reasons, right, Jim? But, it's exciting. And we look at the direct benefits, but we're also looking at a world in which we're finally facing things like climate change, and we're looking at the next big challenge of embodied carbon. And you talk about the supply chain, you need the transparency of understanding where the materials come from. Is there a more efficient way to reduce the footprint and reduce embodied carbon? Think about it, just 10 years ago, how much more difficult it would have been to actually have a rational analysis of what is the embodied carbon, the impact of a design or of a renovation or anything else. And to your point, as we start to look at where suppliers come from, where we are, what is the whole supply chain look like, and how can we optimize that? It's not just we can optimize it for a whole bunch of levers. It can be cost, it can be efficiency, it can be speed, but it can also be environmental impact as well. And it needs to be that. And all of those parameters are there. Those are all dials that can be looked at now and can be transparently looked at in our industry. So I think we have a huge leadership role now, and we capture and control that data. This can't just be about 4 firms, and it isn't. It's got to be about the whole industry, and that's the exciting part. And like you just said, I wish I was 25, just because it's an industry that, to me, will be a lot more exciting than even the industry that I came into, which clearly I was excited as an engineer, but I think the industry wasn't as exciting as what it's going to be over the next 25 years.
Couldn't say it better, Tom. Corporate social responsibility of all of our firms has really evolved, and the needs of the world around us today has changed quite a bit. And I just think that in the future, as we're gathering data, it's going to be based on not just price and schedule and quality. It's got to have all these other dimensions to it, even diversity and inclusion and things of that nature. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this all turns out in 10 or 15 years as I'm waving goodbye to the industry, sadly. At some point, right? We can't go on forever. But like I said, there's a lot of 25 and 30-year-olds. The ones that are in this company, our company, and I'm sure in yours as well, Tom, they're just brilliant, and they're simply smarter than we were when we were at their age. And they're getting educated, and experiential training is occurring for them so much faster than it did back in the 80s and the 90s when we were growing and learning. So they're gonna knock it out of the park. This is gonna be a great industry. I don't think we're gonna be sitting on the bottom rung of that chart of industries that are learning how to adapt and change any longer. I think we're gonna really move up that chart fast.
That demographic is demanding it, right? And they're not just demanding that we be innovative, they're demanding that we have a positive impact on society. They've grown up in an era where that was top of mind for them. And it's exciting to see them come to maturity and live up to the things that we told them as parents. And they're actually turning it into action about how to, taking care of the environment and driving equity and inclusion and diversity. And so it's exciting to see, and it's exciting to see that this is an area where our industry could lead rather than follow.
Welcome to STO Building Conversations, a construction podcast powered by the STO Building Group. Today's episode is part 2 of our interview with Executive Chairman of Thornton Tomasetti, Tom Scarangello, and Executive Chairman of STO Building Group, Jim Donaghy, founding members of the AEC Angels group. Last week, they discussed how the group aims to drive innovation from within the industry through collaborative, strategic investment that could truly change the game. Here's the rest of the conversation.
So hearing the two of you talk, there is incredible similarities of your vision and philosophies of where innovation should be and where the industry is going as a whole. From an investor's point of view, I'd like to get your perspectives of what types of companies are you looking to invest in? And are you looking for a specific area of design and construction processes, or are you open to any types of innovative processes that catch your eye?
I see it as we're looking for investments where we, and when I say we, I mean all of the different components of our industry that are represented by our members right now in AEC Angels or others, can have an immediate and an important impact, right? We're looking really to drive solutions that aren't 5 or 10 years out, but are 5 or 10 months out. Things that actually we can hit the ground running, and where with either modest investments and or mentoring or piloting or support, we can push through the best solutions. And if not the best solutions today. I always give the example, you go back to the days, I may be dating myself, of beta versus VHS. And there was arguments that beta was better than VHS. But guess what won the day? The platform that more people were going to use and was easier to use. But guess what? That led to the world where everything is being streamed live. We need to not be worried about necessarily waiting for perfection, but looking for the ones that can drive our industry forward and where we can have a meaningful role in doing that. So yeah, we're making investments, but they're really modest investments. They're investments to really show that we're willing to put our money where our support is, and also to get the attention, like in the Band of Angels, from bigger investors, that people in the industry who know believe in this enough to not only put their thoughts behind it and their ability to pilot behind it, but they're also willing to put their money where their mouth is. I joke with our people, none of these investments are going to, none of our people are going to be flying private jets. Our path to success is still through Thornton Tomasetti, and it's still through the hard work we do for our clients. But this seed money that we put forward is to really change our industry. And so we're looking for those things that the firms in our industry can push forward, that we can see the quickest path to adoption, and that we can have a meaningful role in making that happen.
Great, thanks. And Jim, from your point of view, obviously knowing that you're in lockstep with that philosophy, and it is how the mission statement of the AEC Angels was built, but are there anything specific true to your heart that you like to focus on?
Well, you know me, I'm a little bit all over the place. I've got quite a few aspirational projects I've got my hands on. The digitization of the supply chain is kind of a heavier lift, and it involves the entire industry pulling together. So that's a slow burn and slow moving machine, but it's starting to make progress, and it shows where the potentials are in our industry. Something more immediate that's exciting, and it's kind of like Amazon-tizing our industry, is a project we're working on in a company called Spackle out in Los Angeles, where they're trying to, leverage our global commercial knowledge and thinking about the size of our footprint. It's not just the STO 43 offices in 4 countries. It's our alliance partners that add another couple of dozen cities. And if we can get all of that knowledge at some point really leveraged, where our platform for setting up bidding and subcontractor selection is universal across the platform, however that may work is to be seen. But, we have seen glimpses of this type of a product in the residential world. One of the companies in the residential world just got $1 billion valuation on this exact same kind of system. I think that the commercial marketplace stands to gain a tool that's going to be multiples the size of that if we can leverage and kind of pull together as an industry. But first, inside STO and our alliance partners is a great opportunity to organize our subcontractor selection process and identify really at a far deeper level than has ever been done before in our industry, who are the specialists in each trade, not only by region, but by type of job. The data entry and the management of that selection process is by real commercial professionals, not by amateurs, but by real professionals who are doing this for a career, in terms of identifying where the subcontractors are really, really strong and where they may not be as strong, and bring out not just craftsmanship into play, but the strength of the balance sheet and the strength of their diversity and inclusion and their safety programs. How often do these subcontractors perform well in meeting our thresholds, which are some of the highest, if not the highest in the industry for safety? All these things have a value, and understanding which subs are the best fit for every single project we work on. And our organization alone, we have roughly 3,000 projects a year. So getting the subcontractor selection piece is one of those untapped opportunities. I just get excited thinking about all the possibilities and how much better we would match up with not just the subcontractors, but the partners we work with, the architects and the engineers and our clients, in terms of appreciation of, wow, that's truly the best group of subs we've ever had on our project. We all know there's so many complex projects, not just that we work on today, but think about the future, all these Class A buildings and, this stagnation we've experienced through COVID. There's going to be a lot of remediation and commissioning required to bring these buildings back to full use. And I think there's going to be a lot of upgrades needed, not only just from the carbon emission reduction plans, but just technologically, how efficient are these buildings? So I think a lot of upgrades are in the pipeline, and handpicking the right subs universally in our industry is one of the huge opportunities. And I think technology is going to help get us there. So that excites me.
Yeah, Jim, you mentioned firms in California, and earlier you were talking about how you tap into ideas around the world or around your industry that isn't necessarily just a city-driven solution. And it made me think of a book back in, I think it was in the maybe 2004, 2005 range. Thomas Friedman wrote a book, The World is Flat. And it was all about how essentially there was going to be a level playing field for industries and others, which is in many ways has come to fruition with some fits and starts. I think that's where, the AEC industry, they're probably going to write a book pretty soon. The AEC industry is flat, right? And what's crazy is COVID, it's been horrific, but if you see the ability to have these kinds of conversations and break down barriers has even accelerated during this period. And the data and the interconnectivity, it used to be if you were in New York, you're in Chicago, you're in San Francisco, you're in London, you could close the walls and say, well, we do it this way, and that's the way we do it. And I think we're rapidly seeing that go away. we're rapidly seeing people saying, why are you doing that? The 3-day cycle, maybe you should reconsider the way you're building in New York because they're doing it differently, whether it's modular or something else in another city. And people are open to that. The collaboration that we're driving with AEC Angels, I really think is being accelerated and enhanced by this kind of flatness that's happening within our industry, where it isn't about geography anymore. Although we're having this geographic conversation in around AEC Angels because the firms here are headquartered in New York, we see this as a much broader world. I think that's ultimately going to be the driver of success, this idea that best ideas come from anywhere in the world, not just from anywhere in the 5 boroughs.
Hey, Tom, I want to just put a plug in for the AEC Angels for a moment here. As you said earlier, we are looking to double, if not triple and quadruple our group. We've got one builder and one architectural firm and one MEP engineer and one structural engineer. But I'd love to see that turn into 2 and then 3 and then 10. And regionally, Tom, you've always been advocating that, this is the model here on the East Coast, but it's the beginning. And replicating this, whether it's the West Coast or South or other countries, is certainly where we want to take this. Because ultimately, we got into this because we said we want to one day look back and say, hey, we had a real impact on the industry. And that's ultimately where we're going to feel like that was why we did the AEC Angels. The industry went back up the ladder of industries that are moving forward, accelerating their change, and we had a lot to do with that.
Yeah, well, you talk about geographic expansion. Like I said earlier, the Band of Angels, that group in Silicon Valley, they went from, I don't know, a small number 30 years ago to over 300 members. But they're still kind of Silicon Valley based in many ways because while it expanded throughout the world, a lot of the innovation spurred and was incubated and accelerated in that geographic area. In our industry, the geography it's everywhere in the world, right? So we are looking at investing and pushing for technology that can touch the whole world. But I think we have to be having these conversations, and they are happening, but we have to figure out how to communicate and connect the dots among all the people who are having these conversations around the world. Because while there still will always be geographic and local, whether they're opportunities or constraints, today there's many more opportunities for a good idea in any part of the world to take root in another part of the world. And I think that's the exciting part of where I think AEC Angels could go, is in either having franchises around the world or just having associations with other like-minded organizations that are trying to drive innovation in their part of the world or their industry.
Yeah, and for those who might be listening and are taking an interest in maybe reaching out to us, and who knows, we might be reaching out to you, what we did was we decided we wanted to partner with firms that have not only proven themselves as innovators in the industry, but have a team and resources available to not only join us in writing, I'm going to say, very moderate sized checks. It's not about the investment with us as much as the resources we can commit to pilot and test products and participate in the development of a firm that's really only at its seed stage or an A stage, and take them to the next level with the input from some of the greatest firms in the AEC space. So it's the partnering piece that we're most excited by. And just to touch on it, the Rumbics and the open space investments the AEC Angel Group made in the past few months, the real excitement there is being able to call the CEOs of those firms and having some really down and dirty productive discussions about, hey, how are we doing piloting your tools out there? And are you getting enough feedback from us? And then vice versa, giving them some feedback about where we like the tool, but there's some areas where we'd love to see improvement on the tool or changes in the tool. And then we get feedback, hey, Jim or Rob, we understand what you're looking for, but here's the feedback we got from some other companies and why that's not really the direction we want to take our product. That conversation, to me, is how these firms are going to become much more successful, much quicker, but also we're benefiting by learning a lot more about these new tools. And it's such a collaborative partnering effect. And that's what we're hoping we can find more contractor, architect, engineering firms that are interested in this same feedback system that we're getting now with the AEC Angels.
Yeah, and Jim, you mentioned our 2 investments, but I would say we have a lot of opportunities, a lot of people who are presenting to us. And, obviously we have to be selective on the ones we think we can have the biggest impact on and the ones that we think have the best chance of success. But what it's also given us the platform to do is exactly what you described. I won't mention their names, but some folks came to us and presented, and they weren't quite focused on our industry, but it was interesting technology. And we were able to open them up to, why aren't you focused on our industry? Why aren't you thinking about us? We're here. It's a big industry. And if you created a module or a component that could address us, it could help with your growth. And I think even those that we didn't invest in or didn't pilot, they may be coming back to us in 3 to 6 months, having listened to us and said, hey, we get it. we understand your industry now, and we've altered our strategy going forward to impact the AEC industry. We're going to invest in a small subset. We're going to pilot a small subset. But just the conversations we're having with these startups is opening up their eyes to an incredible market that we've spent our careers in. And I think that's also going to positively impact our industry as well.
Yeah, I would agree. So after we went through this whole really great conversation about the vision, breaking down the barriers, the collaboration, the investments, all of the networking that we're doing, tell me from your point of view, what obstacles still remain? What other barriers do we have to kind of break through and break down in order for this vision to happen?
So I think there's two. There's the silos, and there's also the issue of risk. We've been in an industry in which has been risk averse. And I would say, as a structural engineer by training, I'm all in to be risk averse, right? I'm not talking existential risk. We design our buildings and our structures to make sure that they will be safe for their useful life and beyond, right? So I'm not talking about risk with the work we do, but I'm talking business risk. We've been an industry that has been very reticent about taking what I would say is reasonable risks to innovate. That's still there. We still have to convince people why they should be the first one or second one or third one to try a technology, which is, I think, the other reason why these groups that we have are important. We need to be the ones who are saying, we're willing to take that business risk. We're willing to go to one of our good clients and say, look, try this out on the product. We're here. It may not be perfect, but if it works, whatever we learn here, we think is going to be of value to in the future. So I think, the two big barriers and the two opportunities are to continue to break down those silos, but also to start to help change the risk tolerance for folks. One of our values at Thornton Tomasetti is that we see opportunities where others focus on risk. And when we put that value down, the word focus was an important word because everybody sees risk, but it's what you focus on that is what's going to drive your opportunity, right? We look to manage our business risk, not to run away from it because there's always risk, right? But I think we're seeing we have to convince our clients and each other that it's a risk worth taking if we're driving innovation. It's not an existential risk. We're not making buildings and sites that are less safe, but it's a business risk that maybe it won't be perfect on the job we're on, but on the next job and the job after, the dividends are going to be well worth the business risk we're taking today.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Tom, wholeheartedly. And finding those clients who are willing to take the risk alongside of us too. Jim, would you like to add to Tom's thoughts?
Yeah, siloed is a great word, Tom. Comes top of my mind as well in terms of a challenge, but I'm excited about watching the silos start to reach out to each other and strategically connect in the ways that we've discussed today. Beyond that is also just the idea that the entire industry worldwide at large, so down at the factory floor and all the installers and the massive number of buildings and project sites that we have, our industry is truly spread out across the entire footprint of the world, right? So it's extremely fragmented industry that happens to be built on top of high risk and low fee and has to deal with the cyclical nature of construction and design and planning. We're very much a return on equity driven business, and we have a long-term view. We've always had that long-term view. It preceded me. I didn't start the concept at STO. My father did. But having a long-term view is the way you get through all of that, and getting more firms to think that way is a challenge. Our industry by nature is very reactionary, and we're solving today's problems. So getting firms to join in and feel safer about the idea that, let's think about 3 years from now. Where do you want your firm to be, and where do you want the industry to be? Where do you want your position in the industry to be? And thinking about the 3-year plans and get out of this quarter by quarter mindset that many of our industry are in. So we've got to continue doing the outreach, talking more about our success stories. I think social media has been helping us communicate a lot more as an industry. And there's a lot more partnering today. I don't know if it's unique to STO. We have more JVs today and design build partnering going on than we've ever had before. And I think it's a testament to the fact that our industry is consolidating in many ways. And that consolidation is going to help this problem. But that, to me, fragmentation is probably the biggest challenge besides the silo effect.
I love how you say that about the fragmentation, because I really come to believe that to push technology in all of its forms is kind of going to be like the Rosetta Stone of our industry, right? It's going to allow us all to speak a common language. And I've seen it inside our own firm. One of our areas that we do in our firm is we call renewal. And that's essentially looking at existing building stock and wherever we work around the world and keeping those assets in good condition, and whether that's renovations or repairs. But it's always been a business that was hard to link together because, terracotta in New York versus drive it in Florida or something. The materiality, the environmental factors, all of those things made the renewal business really, by its nature, almost siloed because the expertise and the challenges were different. We recently introduced a tool called T2D2 where we're using AI to look at materiality and the deterioration of building envelopes, everything from roofing to siding to glass. And what's crazy is that tool is linked our renewal group in a way that our businesses were never been able to be linked before. Our people talked, but they were dealing with different challenges because the materiality and the building types and, like I said, the environments were different. But this technology has brought us all together in sharing how do we actually optimize the restoration and or maintenance of these kind of facilities. And I think this is the common language that can actually drive our industry to be talking, whether you're in London, Chicago, China, San Francisco, or wherever it is. And for years it was like, well, that won't work here, that won't work there. But what we're talking about now is technology that breaks down those barriers. We always say we want to be younger, but we want to be younger here because we can see the future. We as a firm, we've always had 5-year plans, and that's the way we've grown as a company. That we've always had a 5-year plan. We're actually in the first year of our current 5-year plan. But and when I look at the progress over the 5-year plans that I've been a part of, they've been kind of incremental in the sense that you can kind of see the pieces in each 5-year plan. What's going to happen in this 5 years, in the next 5 years, is probably more than happened in the preceding 40 years combined. And that's why I think it's exciting. And that's why we want to hang in there, because there's so much change going to happen. It's going to be dramatic. And it's exciting, and it's going to be positive. We're excited that, we get to join with partners like STL and SHoP and Syska Hennessy and others and drive that. The momentum's growing, and it's only going to keep growing.
Well, gentlemen, this has been extremely insightful and informative, and I would love to have this conversation continue, especially as the AEC Angels group grows with both more investments or just more partners within the group. It would be great to come back and talk again and see how things are going. So thank you very, very much for your time. It was a pleasure speaking with each of you, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thanks for driving the conversation.
Cheers. Have a great day, guys.
Thanks for listening to STO Building Conversations. For more episodes like this, you can find STO Building Conversations on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or the Structure Tone website.